On February 22, 2026, total chaos erupts in Mexico. The entire country is on fire, quite literally. Heavily armed masked men hijack public buses and massive 40-ton semi-trucks, park them sideways across major traffic junctions, and douse them with gasoline. In total, there are more than 250 burning barricades. Puerto Vallarta International Airport hastily cancels its flights. Tourists are stranded in panic while the military engages in bloody, deafening gun battles with cartel soldiers in the streets. More than 70 people are killed in the unrest. In fact, all of this is triggered by the death of a single man, the death of Nemesio Ruben Cervantes, better known as El Mencho. El Mencho was the head of the most powerful drug cartel in history. He was more brutal than Pablo Escobar and more powerful than El Chapo. And that is exactly why we are now going to tell you the absolutely insane story of his twisted life as the world's most dangerous drug lord. At first, there is nothing to suggest that Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes will one day become a powerful and feared billionaire cartel boss. After being born in 1966 in Naranjo de Chile, a remote village in southwestern Mexico, he grows up in extreme poverty. His parents, Juan and Maria, are humble avocado farmers. Nemesio lives with them and his 5 brothers in a tiny mud house that does not even have a proper floor. Naranjo de Chile lies in a barren, dry landscape with very little civilization around it. There is no running water either. Every day the boys have to walk for miles through the scorching heat to carry heavy buckets of drinking water home from a well. Nemesio drops out of school in the 5th grade so he can work in the avocado fields, just like his parents. But while he toils under the blazing sun every day, the boy realizes that this life will never give him anything better. So he knows something has to change. In the late 1970s, there are basically no prospects in rural Mexico. You can practically only become a farmer, though not just for food crops. As Nemesio notices early on, there are also people in the area growing plants used for drugs, mainly marijuana and poppies around Naranjo de Chile. That fascinates the barely 14-year-old boy and shows him that there is a way to earn much more money. So even as a teenager, Nemesio asks the armed men whether he can work for them. The cartel men do not trust him with much at first, but they allow the teenager to guard illegal marijuana fields from then on. And so, at 14 years old, he stands among the plants every day with an old rifle, making sure no one steals them. It is far more pleasant than slaving away in his parents' avocado fields, but it still does not really bring him significantly more money. The cartel still refuses to give the teenager any major responsibilities. Even though he already knows quite a bit about how cartel work operates and learns quickly, he is expected to keep doing nothing but guard fields for the next few years. And since that does not seem likely to change, Nemesio eventually decides to emigrate to the United States. Here, the young Mexican finally wants to make it and start earning real money. So in the early 1980s, Nemesio actually crosses the border into the United States, illegally. In San Francisco's neon-lit Mission District, he begins by selling heroin. It earns him decent money, but the young man keeps getting arrested. Yet that does not stop Nemesio. Quite the opposite. In fact, he uses his time in jail to build connections with cartel members and learn from them. The curious young man has them explain in detail how cross-border drug smuggling works, and perhaps even more importantly, what mistakes led to the smugglers getting caught and ending up in prison. This goes on for several years. Nemesio sells drugs on the street, gets caught, spends a few weeks in jail, and then goes right back to selling drugs to tourists at night in the Mission District. But it cannot go on like that forever. As the United States cracks down hard on anyone involved in narcotics during the so-called war on drugs, Nemesio feels the consequences of his actions for the first time. In 1992, a court sentences him to a full 5 years in a federal prison in Texas. But the bizarre part is this: that long prison sentence does not push the Mexican off his criminal path. Quite the opposite. It is there that Nemesio truly gets to know high-ranking cartel members who teach him in exact detail how international money laundering and large-scale drug trafficking work. Those 5 years in prison become a kind of education for the small-time street dealer. Sitting in his cell, he begins sketching complex smuggling routes onto torn scraps of paper with a tiny pencil stub, refining his plan every single day to become a major drug lord. he would later say that this period taught him more than anything else ever had. When Nemesio is finally deported back to Mexico in 1997 at the age of 30, he immediately begins putting his plans into action. And his first move is as brilliant as it is terrifying. Using a fake resume, he becomes a police officer, more specifically a patrol officer in the municipal police force of Jalisco, a state in western Mexico. The region is not just known for its beautiful beaches, it is also a hotspot for drug trafficking in Mexico. At first, Nemesio's duties in the police mainly consist of simple traffic stops and handling minor offenses. But early on, the Mexican uses the job to observe how the police deal with drug cartels. He memorizes radio codes, identifies surveillance blind spots, and learns firsthand which commanders can be bribed and exactly how much money they demand. Now that Nemesio understands both the world of cross-border drug trafficking and the inner workings of the police apparatus, and has gathered valuable contacts on both sides, he takes off the uniform and leaves the police force. His first stop after that is the notorious Milenio cartel, one of the most dangerous and powerful drug cartels in western Mexico. This is where Nemesio begins his bloody rise to absolute power. He impresses the cartel's boss, Jose Valencia, not only with his detailed knowledge, but also by taking things one step further. Just like with old-fashioned Italian mobsters, family stands above everything else in Mexican cartels. To rise through the Milenio cartel, Nemesio realizes that he himself has to become part of cartel boss Jose Valencia's family. So he repeatedly flirts with Valencia's daughter and eventually even starts a relationship with her. The two end up getting married, and Nemesio is now part of the family of one of Mexico's biggest drug bosses. But it is not just the wedding that convinces Valencia of Nemesio's talent. Above all, it is his incredible ruthlessness. Nemesio, who until then had only dealt drugs and gathered knowledge, now develops into a cold-blooded killer in the Milenio cartel, for example, on one evening shortly before his wedding. A rival dealer has tried to sell drugs in the Valencia family's territory in Jalisco. On behalf of his father-in-law, Nemesio enters the bar where the man is staying, dressed in an inconspicuous leather jacket. He walks straight past the pool tables toward the nervous-looking dealer at the bar. He reaches into his jacket, pulls out a heavy Colt M1911, aims at the man and pulls the trigger without hesitation. Then Nemesio simply turns around and leaves the bar with the same calm, steady pace he arrived with. In the years that follow, he becomes an expert at cleaning up territories. If someone owes money to the Milenio cartel or is suspected of being a police informant, Nemesio is the one who knocks on the door in the middle of the night and kills them without the slightest emotion. These years as an ice-cold enforcer, when he personally pulls the trigger, later earn Nemesio the absolute respect of his subordinates. Because everyone in his future organization knows that the boss used to do the dirty work himself, and that he would do it again at any time. Nemesio, now known as El Mencho, also proves himself to be a brilliant networker. He manages to forge more and more alliances for the Milenio cartel with other Mexican drug cartels, expanding the criminal organization's influence and power. Eventually, El Mencho and his group even handle the drug business and finances of the notorious Sinaloa cartel and its boss El Chapo, who at that point is the country's biggest cartel leader. When several high-ranking members of the most powerful cartels are arrested and shot in 2009 and 2010, creating a power vacuum in the cartel world, El Mencho sees a historic opportunity to climb much higher. Under the name Los Matazetas, he now forms his own radical core group, made up exclusively of the most brutal, ruthless, and cunning former members of other cartels he knows, with the goal of eliminating all rivals and becoming the country's biggest drug boss. As leader of Los Matazetas, he presents his group to the public as a kind of vigilante force, supposedly trying to protect the country from the atrocities of other cartels. And in fact, many Mexicans are happy as Los Matazetas begin taking out more and more cartels, whose violence they have suffered under. Through this clever PR move, El Mencho achieves something almost no criminal ever does. He wins the support of the Mexican population. People begin to like El Mencho, and El Mencho begins celebrating his power in a deeply disturbing way. On September 20th, 2011, at around 5 p.m., right in the middle of rush hour, several pickup trucks stop beneath a busy underpass near the large shopping center Plaza Las Americas in Boca del Rio. At that exact moment, just a few hundred meters away, a national conference of Mexico's attorneys general and justice ministers is taking place in the city, which lies in the Veracruz metropolitan area. Heavily armed masked men jump off the backs of the pickups. Within seconds, they drag dozens of bodies wrapped in bloody plastic tarps over the edges of the truck beds and throw them onto the asphalt. Inside those bloody plastic wrappings are the lifeless bodies of men from cartels at war with El Mencho. As if dumping body bags onto the street were not grotesque enough already, the plastic bags also bear stickers that read, "Citizens of Veracruz, do not let yourselves be extorted anymore. We are here to take out the trash." But in reality, El Mencho is not trying to protect the city. He wants absolute power, and he has now proven in dramatic fashion that he is willing to achieve it by any means necessary. This operation also becomes the birth of El Mencho's new empire, the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, or CJNG for short, because he knows that if he wants to win the drug war in Mexico, he needs an entirely new kind of cartel, bigger, more ruthless, and better trained than any other cartel or the police. CJNG is built like a new kind of military. To do that, the cartel begins recruiting young men on a massive scale. But they do not simply become part of the cartel overnight. They are first given real training, in strictly secret paramilitary training camps deep in the mountains. There, CJNG breaks the minds of its new recruits. In order to eradicate every last trace of empathy and scruple, the young men are forced, for example, to eat the flesh of murdered enemies. Anyone who hesitates during this ritual cannibalism or refuses is immediately executed by a shot to the head from the instructors. This unimaginable process creates a loyal army of hitmen who are completely cold-blooded. By now, El Mencho has completely transformed. From a small-time drug dealer to the deputy leader of a local cartel, he has now become one of the most important people in Mexico. El Mencho is no longer just a cartel boss. He becomes a kind of dictator, quite literally, because CJNG has by then become a full-fledged army. In less than 4 years, El Mencho builds that army into an unbelievable force of 30,000 highly disciplined soldiers. But El Mencho can no longer exist openly. From 2012 onward, he had become too dangerous for the Mexican state, and from that point on, the authorities keep trying to arrest him, but they fail. El Mencho has too much power. The drug boss's army protects him extremely well and shows the police in brutal fashion who is really in charge. For example, on April 6, 2015. On that day, El Mencho has 15 police officers shot and then has the local police chief, Miguel Ángel Caicedo Vargas, executed. A few weeks later, on May 1, 2015, the state therefore decides to go after El Mencho with the military instead of just the police. But on the very first day of the mission, the Mexican government is forced to learn just how unbelievably dangerous El Mencho's troops really are. When an elite unit of the Mexican military spots a convoy of the drug boss's vehicles from a helicopter on a forest road, the cartel members do not run. They attack. One cartel member standing on the back of a pickup truck lifts a Russian RPG-27 rocket launcher onto his shoulder. He calmly aims at the helicopter in the sky and fires. The aircraft is hit, spins wildly around its own axis, and crashes into the trees in a gigantic fireball. 9 high-ranking elite soldiers burn in the wreckage. Never before in Mexico's history had a cartel dared to do something like that. That same day, El Mencho's men set fire to 39 buses, 11 banks, and 16 gas stations in a total of 20 cities to show once and for all who is now in charge of the country. By that point, CJNG almost seemed like a military force of its own. And while his enormous cartel keeps carrying out such gruesome demonstrations of power, El Mencho himself now operates strategically, almost like the CEO of a multinational logistics corporation. He knows, for example, that the biggest profit margins are in Europe. So CJNG forms an alliance with the Calabrian Andrangheta, the most powerful mafia in Europe. In shipping containers hidden inside legal export goods, El Mencho floods the ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam with tons of cocaine and fentanyl. The billions in profit generated from this are laundered through offshore banks, illegal gold mines in Ecuador, and Chinese cryptocurrency networks. If you think that El Mencho, now a billionaire, lives a dream life because of all his power and wealth, you would be wrong. In reality, he is suffering from severe kidney failure. He is permanently dependent on dialysis treatments secretly administered by loyal doctors. Since the United States placed a staggering $15 million bounty on his head, he has also grown increasingly paranoid. He no longer uses cell phones and barely dares to leave his hideout, a villa in the Tapalpa Country Club. Instead, he spends his days there with dialysis, painkillers, and prayer. Even within his own cartel, hardly anyone knows where he is hiding. But after years of intelligence work, the CIA and Mexican authorities eventually discover who El Mencho's closest personal courier is. They put the man under surveillance and are finally led to the drug boss's villa in the Tapalpa Country Club. On February 22, 2026, Mexican Special Forces strike. In the early morning hours, helicopters and ground troops move toward the drug boss's hideout. As they enter the estate, the alarm system goes off. El Mencho's security team immediately opens fire. In the gunfight, 4 bodyguards die in a hail of bullets and 3 soldiers are seriously wounded. El Mencho, now 59 years old and weakened by illness, tries to escape through the west wing of the house and into the dense forest with 4 loyal men. But the special forces storm the building. They pour massive suppressive fire down the long hallway of the west wing, and so the bullets from their assault rifles finally bring down El Mencho, the most powerful drug boss in the world. The soldiers rush forward and secure the heavily bleeding cartel boss because their mission is clear. El Mencho must be captured alive. They load him into a military helicopter and fly him toward a hospital. But El Mencho's internal organs are so badly damaged that he dies during the flight. The Mexican government celebrates the morning of February 22, 2026 as a historic triumph. But, as mentioned at the very beginning of the video, his cartel immediately sets the whole country on fire in revenge. El Mencho may be dead, but his cartel still exists. The struggle over who will succeed him will, in all likelihood, lead to brutal power battles and countless more deaths. But what do you think about El Mencho, about Mexico's cartel problem, and about whether this entire spiral of violence will ever come to an end?